Good evening. I'm Michael Poppa, Executive Director of the Mainstream Coalition, and thank you for joining us this evening for Mainstream Almost Live. Due to some technical difficulties with Facebook, we weren't able to stream live, but we still wanted to bring you Representative Woodard, so we're recording and reposting later on. As some of you may know, for more than 30 years, Mainstream has been fighting extremist voices and advocating for common sense government and healthy communities in Kansas. And now we're continuing our work even through this COVID-19 pandemic with programs like this to keep you engaged with the world around you. If you'd like to be involved with Mainstream, please visit our website at mainstreamcoalition.org. And now I'd like to introduce my guest this evening, Kansas Representative Brandon Woodard from the 30th House District. Representative Woodard, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. How are you holding up?
I'm holding up. It's certainly quite the change going from being out and about and being in Topeka and doing events in the evenings and seeing friends and family all the time to being cooped up at home by myself. Luckily, constituents have been reaching out and I've been able to connect with them and checking in with family, talk to some of my family members more now than I did before. So it's fine. It's fun. I feel like I'm on the phone all the time now. A lot of Zoom calls, but trying to stay busy and stay in a routine. Certainly today's weather has been a lot more cooperative than some of the recent days.
Right. Definitely enjoyed the sun today.
Yes.
And at the weekend. Have you found that you're actually receiving more constituent communications since everyone is at home?
Yes. I mean, I haven't gone back to look at, how that has compared pre and post coronavirus, but we certainly are hearing from dozens of constituents who are having issues navigating unemployment, who are hurting, their business doesn't know what to do right now. And I think generally, beyond those, you also get folks who are reaching out about all sorts of things and issues that they care about. I think that when they have more time at home, they're like, oh, I should probably reach out to my elected officials and let them know where I'm at on this issue. Right. So I've heard from a lot of people. I think most realize that we're not in session right now, but also reminding people that due to the coronavirus, we're not actually in Topeka, so we can't make some of the changes they want to see happen just yet.
So what do you think? Do you think you're going back?
I don't know. I was actually skimming through the Shawnee Mission Post Capitol updates today, and nearly everyone today posted about how we don't know. We're scheduled to go back a week from today, but at this point, Kansas hasn't peaked yet. Even the White House's guidelines said today that states shouldn't begin reopening phase one until they've had 14 days of declined new cases. And so I think that's to be seen. We've seen some of our surrounding states go back for emergency funding or temporary legislation and gone back, really focused on staying in their offices and then coming to the floor one at a time to cast their vote on legislation. So I think if we do go back, we're going to have to take some extreme precautions because frankly, as the youngest Democrat in the legislature, but one of the youngest members of the legislature, we do have a lot of our members who are in the at-risk categories. And so we've got to make sure that if we go back, we're not putting even our legislators' lives at stake as well.
Of course. We definitely want you to be safe
exactly.
when you're making decisions.
Yeah.
As one of the first two openly LGBTQ members of the legislature, how do you think that your presence there in the Kansas House has impacted pro-LGBTQ legislation?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, you look at, for so long not having openly LGBT voices in the Kansas House or Kansas Senate, we saw years and years and years after currently, under Sam Brownback's administration of anti-LGBT legislation, coming out, actively opposing, targeting the LGBTQ community. More often than not, the trans community, looking at things like bathroom bills and things that are very hateful and hurtful to members of our community. So, just looking at nothing other than stats, while there were anti-LGBT measures introduced, since Representative Ruiz and I have been there, those bills didn't see a single hearing and they got sent to a committee to die. And so I think that our voices, you have to, now that these people aren't just voting against something that they're thinking about or trying to make legal changes with something that they care about or whatever else. Now they have colleagues who they can introduce a bill, but that might impact someone that sits on the House floor with them. And so I think that Representative Ruiz and I have both gone out of our way to build those relationships with our colleagues to make sure that people realize that we are also just human beings. And I think when you build those relationships with them, it makes it tougher for them to hate us.
Sure, definitely. So, your presence has impacted pro-LGBT legislation, of course, because you've been able to, introduce legislation. But as you're saying, it's also impacted the anti-LGBTQ legislation because it's not going forward as it used to.
Right. Yeah.
Because you're a human. I was going to say you're a person.
Exactly.
Rep Ruiz are human beings and with feelings, and you form those relationships, and that really helps people get to know you, and You're more than just LGBTQ at that point.
Exactly. And I think to speak to that success, I mean, we've always had allies in the legislature. We've had groups like Equality Kansas and those who have advocated on behalf of the LGBT community for literally decades. The marriage amendment in Kansas happened when I was a freshman in high school. And to now stand on the shoulders of people who have been fighting this fight since day one or since before day one is an honor. And I think as a testament to that, the work that they've done laid the groundwork for Representative Ruiz and I to introduce the first statewide non-discrimination bill that actually had members' names on it. It was bipartisan between Representative Ruiz and I and Senator Barbara Bollier over in the Senate. We had 56 bipartisan co-sponsors, which when we introduced that had more bipartisan co-sponsorship than any other piece of legislation with public support. People actually putting their name on it. And I think that speaks to the volume of the importance of really building those relationships with people and making sure that they understand that here's something that you can do right now to make Kansas a more welcoming and inclusive place. Oh, by the way, our businesses are already kind of doing this, and it's pro-business because we are losing out to employers are losing out contracts to other states because of the laws that we have on the books. If we say to the rest of the country, here in Kansas, we care more about how hard you work and the impact you're going to have on your community more than anything else. We want you to live here and work here, regardless of who you are or who you love. I think that's a great thing for Kansas.
Definitely. And you said it was the first one with huge bipartisan support, but it did see roadblocks this year. So what's the status of that current legislation?
Yeah, so a year after it was introduced, we introduced it in the 2019 legislative session. A year later, we advocated like crazy throughout the 2019 session to really push for even just a hearing where people could come in, the public could come in and say, here's why I like this bill, here's why our chamber or our business or whatever else wants to support this. And also so the opponents could come in and make their case as well. That never got scheduled. We did go back a year after that was introduced and say, we want a hearing, we want a hearing, we want a hearing. And we saw roadblocks from the committee chair or the majority leader, the Speaker of the House. And it actually, our last day in Topeka, March 19th, when we adjourned early, we were actually scheduled to have a hearing on this bill on that day. A week before, Representative Susan Ruiz and I had talked to a number of our allies and said, enough is enough. If they're not going to give us a hearing and allow us to come in, this House and this Senate have never heard a statewide non-discrimination bill. It's been 4 or 5 years, so it wasn't the members of the current Senate. Enough's enough. And we were going to force a procedural vote, and in turn, we got a hearing granted. Unfortunately, the coronavirus upended that, and so I think that whether we do go back this year or whether it's next year, we're going to have to continue to push for making all really mean all here in Kansas.
Definitely. And I know Mainstream, we wrote testimony for it, and we were planning on being there to give our oral testimony. And unfortunately, as you said, it got canceled, but we will be there with you when it is rescheduled.
Well, thank you. And thanks for doing that.
Yeah. So in addition to representing your district, District 30, you're also a voice for the LGBT community, and I'm part of that community. So thank you very much. In Kansas, how does that impact your work as a legislator?
Yeah, so I think you have to look at, every single day in our job, you are reading things and voting on things that you never even imagined you would frankly care about. I'm on the insurance committee, and every day I'm reading new bills before a hearing to kind of understand what's in the bill, what's going on. And so in addition to doing that and trying to work on the issues you ran on, some of the big things I focused on in my campaign were expanding Medicaid because we have to do it. We need to bring our tax money back here, lowering the food sales tax, which there was a plan, but given today's consensus revenue estimates, it's probably going to be on the back burner right now. And then fully funding our public schools. And so it wasn't until really probably about halfway through the campaign, and certainly upon being elected, where I understood the gravity of how important representation is for the LGBT community. Looking at everything from the high school student reaching out to say, your candidacy allowed me to have the courage to come out to my parents, or seeing your response and standing up for me against this anti-trans athlete bill means the world to me. And I feel like someone in state government actually hears me and sees me and knows that I have worth. And so those are the things that kind of hit you right in the feels. I'm there to do everything I can possibly do for my district. In addition to doing that, I feel honored to be part of Kansas history and standing up and representing our community at the state level. There's 2 of us out of 165 in the entire legislature. Hopefully we can keep growing those numbers to gain equity as far as representation in the future. But I mean, I wouldn't say it impacts my work. I feel like I'm a very effective legislator. I do listen to my constituents. I confidently believe that every vote I've taken fully reflects the majority of the people in my district, and also using the platform that the people of District 30 have given me to make sure that more broadly in Kansas and in our country, LGBT voices know that they have a seat at the table as well.
Great. And you talked a little bit earlier, you're more than just LGBTQ individual. You're more than just the community. Your work is broader than that, right? Even though it might impact or color your world, our
right.
world. You're also the ranking minority member on the House Higher Education Budget Committee. So what role have you played in funding higher education?
Yeah, so I actually got my start in not necessarily politics, but following state government when I was in student leadership at KU. My senior year, I was student body vice president at the university, and we were in the middle of some of the toughest cuts to higher education back then. That was midway through, I believe, the first term of Governor Brownback. The state's budget was depleted. We were still recovering from the economic downturn, the recession. And so following that, getting involved at that early on, and then ultimately working at a university, now fundraising for a university, when I was elected, I was passionate about making sure that we undid the 9 consecutive cuts to higher education. So I was determined to muscle my way onto the higher ed budget committee and be part of that. In 2019, we actually had one of the most successful higher education funding years in over a decade. We restored about $34 million in 4-year university funding and for the Board of Regents, which allowed the Board of Regents to keep in-state tuition flat at our 4-year universities, which for in-state students, it was huge, right? We made some progress this year. After Representative Brandon Woodard was elected to be mayor of the city of Wichita, I raised my hand when they were looking for a new ranking minority member. That was one of the things that I knew I could bring a lot of experience and represent both the governor's administration, but also our caucus and our focus on that workforce development and rebuilding higher ed in Kansas. We made some gains this year, but again, the economy has kind of just been upended. And so I think that we've had some success with restoring funding for higher education. We have a long way to go. I think within coronavirus, in the same way that it's impacting our personal and professional lives, it's really going to transform the way that higher education is delivered in the future. Our universities have gone in just a couple of weeks from in classroom with 1,000 students to delivering that same sort of instruction online. I think it's going to take a lot of resources to make that sustainable long term, but I think that it's just shown how agile we need to be to build the future economy, of course, our future higher education system, but just generally how much more we can do with technology.
Sure. And the impact on, and you had mentioned this, the impact on higher education going forward is going to be pretty significant, especially for some of the smaller liberal arts colleges.
Right.
I would think, this is opening up a whole new way of delivering education, and I'm assuming it'll at least take a lot more resources, like you said, for those specific colleges and higher education places to be able to keep going.
Exactly.
So Medicaid expansion, you mentioned that earlier, right?
Nice.
It's facing opposition right now, some really big opposition from Senate leadership, specifically Senator Wagle. What options do you think right now are available for expanding Medicare during this crisis?
Yeah, so Medicaid expansion is one of the top things that I focused on and heard from the people of my district when we were campaigning in 2018. Throughout the primary in general, we went to the targeted set of doors 8 times. And so, those first couple of times we're just introducing ourselves and hearing from people, what do you want to see your state government do? What do you care about? And my district is one of the youngest average age districts in the state. We've got a lot of people who are lower income who do fall into that coverage gap that would benefit from Medicaid expansion. And so you get there to Topeka as a first-term lawmaker, and you're like, yes, we know we have the votes for this. We know that we have enough votes in the House and the Senate, and we have a governor that will sign this. And you quickly learn how frustrating it is that we in the House in 2019 had to use a procedural measure to force Medicaid expansion to the floor. We actually did something called overruling the rules chair that hadn't been done in over 20 years. And it took weeks of collaborating to build that coalition to make sure it was strong enough to ensure that we could force and override all of the opponents to make sure that vote took place. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of those same votes in the Senate to get that done. And so right now what you see is 1 or 2 people, Senator Wagle being one of them, completely obstructing the will of the majority of Kansans, the majority of the House, and the majority of the Senate. That's disgusting. In light of the coronavirus, if we do go back to Topeka, something we must absolutely do is expand Medicaid. Initial projections were maybe 130 to 150,000 Kansans could benefit under expansion. We've forfeited so much money because the states cover 10% of the cost of expanding Medicaid. The federal government reimburses 90% of the cost. I imagine that number, 150,000 people, is going to go up in light of this global health crisis. And while it wouldn't go into effect unless we made a change until January 1, it's going to be absolutely essential to the long-term rebuilding of our economy. We've got to have a healthy workforce if we want to have people go back to work. If they can't get tested or get treated for coronavirus or what other health issues we're having, it's not going to be a good thing. And so if we do go back to Topeka, I will continue to urge my colleagues to take a vote in the Senate. We could pass another bill in the House, but it's going to see the same opposition in the Senate. And so we've really got to put pressure on our senators if we go back to Topeka.
Definitely. And I wonder if it wouldn't have seen so much opposition if it wasn't such a major election year.
We've known about, under the Affordable Care Act, expanding Medicaid. And I understand some people wanting to make sure we get it right, that we have a Kansas solution, but this has been studied and delayed and dragged on for year after year after year. And of course, the one person that's blocking it is running for U.S. Senate. And so to use the health and potential access to healthcare of more than 150,000 Kansans to attempt to benefit in a campaign, it's frustrating. I'm proud to be part of the bipartisan coalition of common sense legislators that want to actually help the majority of Kansans. That's why I ran. I wanted to be part of the solution. I knew I'd be in the minority party in Kansas, but knew I could join forces with the people who want to do right by Kansans. Somehow we've just got to figure out how to get the Senate president out of the way right now.
Right. Well, switching gears. I also want to talk to you a little bit about the massive transportation plan that the legislature passed. How do you think that's going to impact the Kansas economy, generally speaking?
Yeah, so before coronavirus, we had only actually sent one bill to the governor's desk that had become law, and it was pretty technical in nature. And so I was at least surprised, yet also happy that they said that among the bills that we were going to pass before we left Topeka would include the transportation plan. And so the Senate and the House kind of negotiated back and forth on what the final package would look like. But here in District 30, we've got I-35, I-435, and K-10 all converging at the interchange. And while not every single person in my district uses those, so many of the people here do use that to get to work, to get to school, to get to wherever else they're going pre-COVID. Our essential workers are obviously using it right now. But I do think that that is a $10 billion 10-year plan. And I think that it's going to be crucial to helping rebuild what Kansas looks like. We've got some roads out in central and western Kansas that cars shouldn't be driving on. They're so degraded, yet we have semi-trucks hauling necessary equipment. Or we have currently military vehicles carrying necessary PPE and other testing supplies to combat coronavirus. We've got to make sure that our roads and bridges are top-notch like they once were, and that's going to take a comprehensive plan, bringing both aviation and rail and passenger and our roads and bridges all together. And I was very excited to see, it's very uncommon that you feel the love of bipartisanship. That last week in Topeka it was truly an honor to be a member of the legislature, more so a member of the House, because the Senate always mucks things up a little bit. But it was great to come together, whether it was the transportation plan or extending unemployment benefits, and really looking at how can we all come together right now to make sure that every Kansan's going to get through this.
Excellent. And that seems to be that comes through, I think. Really, when you get to it with some of those common sense leaders like yourself.
Thank you.
And it especially comes through on Twitter. How do y'all have so much, not that you have so much time up there, but you're very diligent about tweeting and getting your information out to your constituents in many different ways?
Yeah, so I kind of just modeled myself after Representative Clayton, and I was glad to see her on one of the mainstream lives a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I followed in those years of paying attention to what the legislature was doing when it came to higher education. And I think anyone that's gone to the Kansas legislator website, the tools are all there. All the information you're looking for is there. How to find it's not incredibly clear. So Stephanie, or Representative Clayton, has always been so transparent and proactive about making sure that everyone knows exactly what's going on. And so I committed to my constituents before realizing how quickly it requires you to be able to type and copy and paste and get things out there right as they're happening. Committed to being that backup to her social media and being part of this new wave of legislators that would, one, continue to shine a light on what's happening in the State House, but also looking at how can we continue to demystify our state government? How can we make sure that young people who may not subscribe to their local newspaper, although they should, or a media outlet, or don't know who their state representative is because they don't know where to go to find that. How can we make sure that they have immediate access to know not only what's going on in Topeka, but how to understand it? And I've tried to make sure that we break that down in a way that is small enough and makes sense enough that anyone that's paying attention can read it. But I also understand not everyone's on Facebook, not everyone's on Twitter. And so I do a weekly e-newsletter. We've collected emails when we've gone to the doors. We've done surveys in the district. I host 2 listening sessions a month. And I think part of that was just, I was so frustrated enough to run for office that I had a representative who would not return phone calls, wouldn't respond to emails, refused to meet with me if I'd come to Topeka. Eventually, I just thought it was me, so I found some Republican friends to go do the same, and he treated them the same way. And so stepping up to run, I knew that I was committing to being as accessible as possible and being the representative that I believed I deserved. It's rewarding, it's exhausting, live tweeting and keeping everyone up to date as quickly as possible, but my typing skills have definitely improved in the last 2 years.
Nice. I could not do that. Bulldog's new trick type thing. No, I could not.
On the House floor, you've got Representative Clayton, and I sit next to her, and then I've got Representative Shue. So I left, and we're all, super active on social media. And so during some of the most intense debates, people will come up to talk to us and we're like, we're tweeting, what's going on? So
Can't talk. Social media.
I can listen to the people having the debate and also update people, but adding a third task apparently just doesn't work for my brain.
Right. Definitely. And this is talking about transparency and demystifying government. Two things. First, where does one go if they would like to receive your communication?
Yeah, so they can go to the Kansas Legislature website, which has all of our names listed. That includes our email, so they can email me. I also have a website, woodardforkansas.com, and they can sign up there and just note that they want to be on our newsletter list. Follow me on Twitter at Woodard4, Kansas. And then my Facebook is the same way. So we've got links on all of those to sign up for more information. I've got just kind of a breakdown, and I think most people have seen it. When it comes to live tweeting, I try to keep the tweets to the facts, and then I'll opine after that. So
right. And for all of those out there watching, if you think you might be in Representative Woodard's district but not sure, or you just want to find out if you are, who is your representative, you can go to ksledgelookup.org, type in your address, and your representative and senator will pop up for you. So that's another easy way to find out who's representing you and get in touch with them.
I probably could have said that, since that's probably the most frequent website I tweet, especially right now when people are looking for help with all the different resources out there.
Right. Oh, and thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
It's a very important election year. All voting is important. All elections are important, but it's even more critical that people get out to vote this year, or because of the pandemic that's going on.
Right.
Doing a huge push for mail-in ballots. I know advanced voting, mainstream coalition is, a lot of other organizations. I've seen candidates out there pushing. Have you found anything that works better than not to just educate people on voting and get them out there, or not get them out there anymore, but to get on, online and order that mail ballot?
Yeah, so we did a big push for voting by mail in 2018. We're going to have to focus on that now. We had people who said, well, I'll sign up for a ballot, but I'm not going to vote for you. And I was like, you need to be voting either way.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think using ksvotes.org has been transformational, especially for young people. Being able to go on your phone, go to ksvotes.org, double check that you're registered to vote. The majority of the people in my district are renters. And so we're constantly updating our voter file, constantly making sure, double check your registration, make sure your apartment number is correct, make sure you're an active voter right now, and go ahead while we're talking and go ahead and request your mail ballot. We know that exponentially people are more likely to actually get out and vote if they vote by mail. And as we've seen with the coronavirus, it's all the more important to ensure that your voice is heard, that your vote is counted. And what better way than to, I make a point out of it every year of voting from my couch in sweatpants. It's great. Right. So it gives people time to research the candidates that are on their ballot, look at different organizations, whether it's mainstream or whatever organization they rely on, to help vet those candidates. I know all the different groups have different political arms that help vet candidates.
Right. Well, those are all the questions I have for you this evening. Anything else any words of wisdom you'd like to impart on us?
Oh, I don't know about words of wisdom, but I definitely thank you all for hosting these. I've had a great time watching the folks you've had on. I'm excited about your lineup of guests from now on. And just to those people out there, if you're struggling right now, if you need assistance with state benefits, please do contact your state legislators. We are here to help. We are able to connect you with our liaisons in the departments to hopefully help expedite whatever you're going through and get an answer more quickly. Or if you just are lonely, I've had people in the district reach out just to say, I needed someone to talk to. I'm happy to do that. So reach out, stay engaged, stay connected with everyone, wash your hands, stay home when you can, and we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you so much for the work that you do on behalf of your district and all Kansas. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.